Hello everyone, it's Rod from PhotoFair with another impromptu video. Today I want to talk about the super cool and reasonably priced Leica Elmerit 90mm f2.8. This is an R-mount lens. It was designed for Leica single lens reflex cameras. There's all different kinds of 3-cam, 2-cam, no cam, all these different styles of lenses that were made for the various Leica film bodies. It is important, if you're going to shoot this on a Leica R film body, that you get the appropriate lens for your Leica R film body. This video is not the place to find out about the intricacies of the various Leica R bodies dating all the way back to the 1960s and on through the modern times. Today I want to talk about using this lens on modern digital cameras and adapting it to some common film cameras like Canon EOS film cameras, for example. For that, the 3-cam, the 2-cam, the 1-cam, all of that doesn't really matter because you're not utilizing the Leica R mount, you're utilizing the mount of your camera, okay? This becomes a manual lens stop-down metering when you use it on a modern camera. So what I've done here, as many of you know, I shoot with Canon EOS cameras. I have an EOS 5D Mark III. I have an EOS EF adapter on this lens. The nice thing about Leica R is that the flange distance is quite a bit deeper than it is on the EOS, and therefore there's no interference with the mirror, even on the full frame 5D Mark III. No interference at all, so it works perfectly. You're going to stop down meter. You can use aperture priority or manual exposure, and of course it's going to be manual focus because this is an old manual focus lens. This guy right here, this particular Leica Elmerit 90, was actually made in 1963. Leica is really good. You can look up their serial numbers and find out exactly when your lens was made, what factory it was made in, all of that stuff. This one, of course, says right on it, Leitz Wetzlar, so we know that this one was made in the factory in Germany. Doesn't matter if it was made in the Canadian factory or made in the German factory. They're all made to Leica's rigid standards. Speaking of rigid standards, this thing is built like a tank. Don't buy this thinking, oh, it's a 2.8-90, it's going to be super lightweight. Wrong. This thing is heavy. The reason being, Leica made all of their lenses to the same high-grade standard. Brass, helicoil, steel, metal, no plastic, ball bearing detents. I mean, this thing is built just as well as Leica's much more expensive Summicron version. And so you get that beautiful premium quality for a very good price. You can pick these up for $200 to $400 depending on condition. You can find them at PhotoFair. There's almost always a guy with a table with old Leica R lenses on there. Okay, and you can hold them, feel them, touch them, and hopefully buy them. We have a PhotoFair coming up in Portland on the 29th of this month. September 29th, that's a Saturday. It's at the Jackson Armory. I'm very excited about it. I hope if you're in the Portland area, you'll come up and see us. We also have another show in Newark on November the 10th down in the Bay Area. So mark your calendars for those. Go to photofair.com. You can see the entire 2019 schedule for our photo shows as well. So anyway, back to the lens. So as I mentioned, I mounted this thing up for my EF camera. I also can use it on my EOS M5, and that's really the camera where I have the most fun with this. The EOS M5 is actually the camera I'm using to film this video. I've got an old Zeiss Biotar 58 f2, and I'm shooting it through a focal reducer to create an effective 36mm f1.4. So that's kind of cool. I did an entire article on the mechanics and operation of focal reducers and teleconverters on Couv Camera. So you can look that up, Couv Camera, and you can see that. I just published that last month. That'll tell you all about how the focal reducers work and so on and so forth. And it's focal reducers where I have the most fun with this Leica 90mm f2.8. So what the focal reducer does, and this is going to be the Cliff Notes version, if you want the details, go to Couv Camera, but it effectively reduces the focal length of the lens by a set amount. In the case of the one that I have, it's 0.72x. So it's kind of like a wide-angle adapter almost, okay? And the way it works is that this lens is designed for full-frame cameras, either film, 35mm, or full-frame cameras like my EOS 5D Mark III. So the lens is producing an image circle large enough to cover a sensor 24 by 36 millimeters. Well, the M5 doesn't have a sensor that big, nor does any APS-C camera, whether it's a Sony A6000 series or any of Micro Four Thirds cameras. So those sensors aren't that big. And what that means is there's a whole bunch of light that's just not landing on the sensor. So a focal reducer takes that light that's falling off, into the painted black surfaces of the inside of your camera mount and focuses it onto the actual smaller sensor. So effectively, you're getting more light on the sensor. And so it reduces the effective focal length of the lens in exchange for more light focused on a smaller sensor. So what happens is, in the case of this lens, this becomes a 67 millimeter f2 instead of a 90 millimeter f2.8. Now, since we're using this lens on a smaller sensor camera, a 67 millimeter on Canon's APS-C sensor, which has a crop factor of 1.6, is still going to shoot kind of like a 100. So you kind of have a 100 f2 when you do that. That's where I have the most fun with this. So it's the most important thing to remember is that the focal reducer isn't actually changing the focal length of this lens. That's actually not possible. It is what it is. It's a 90 millimeter lens. What it's doing, though, is it's utilizing the smaller sensor to effectively reduce the focal length. You're still getting 90 millimeter depth of field with this thing. Now, you're also not truly changing the f-stop. Again, you're just changing the effective f-stop. So it's still a 90 f2.8. So you're still going to have the same depth of field for the most part as you would with a 90 f2.8. Okay, so that's going to stay the same, which is nice. It's a nice portrait. You can throw the background out of focus reasonably well at f2.8. But what you get is that extra stop of speed, and that's kind of nice. So now it kind of makes this a little more exotic. And of course, this lens has the build quality. Don't buy this thing if you think it's light. Like I said earlier in the video, this thing's kind of a tank. But you get something truly magnificent, something really well made, a finely crafted lens for a really reasonable price, and it performs really well. I find the focal reducers do not affect the quality in a negative way. I have a real cheap focal reducer because I'm waiting for Metabones to come out with a good one for the EF to EFM mount. You hear me, Metabones? You hear me? Come on, buddy. Anyway, so I'm using just a cheap kind of knockoff unit, and although it is slightly prone to flare if you shoot right into a light source, which usually is not a good idea anyway, it is slightly prone to flare, but optically, it's razor sharp. I see no loss of quality, and I'm even going to show you a few pictures right now, some made with my 5D Mark III full frame 90 f2.8, some of them made at the effective 67 f2 on this camera here, the M5. So take a peek. So there you have it. I mean, it's pretty nice. I really strongly recommend this lens if you can swing the big bucks for the Summicron version, get the Summicron version. I may get a Summicron version one of these days. I'm just kind of a stingy person when it comes to these old classic lenses. I like to just have fun with the old classic lens. It's my ability to manually focus isn't what it once was. So if I'm really serious about shooting portraits, I'm probably going to bite the bullet and put one of my Canon lenses on there, EF lenses, because autofocus really helps, guys. There's a lot more gray in my hair than this video shows. So, but for having fun, just playing with old school glass, I'm not as concerned about having the higher end Summicron version, but they did make a 90 f2 Summicron. Those run more like $600-700. So you're going to find guys at Photo Fair that have these lenses, camera shows in your area. They're all over the United States. I strongly recommend them. It's why Graham and I own Photo Fair, because we love the camera shows. We want to keep them alive. And we hope you can come to Portland on the 29th of September and Newark on the 10th of November. If you can't get to a camera show, again, you can find these things on eBay, KEH Camera. lots of different places where you can buy these old school lenses. But this thing is just beautifully made. It's truly just a finely crafted, like a Swiss watch. I mean, just really made well. Everything about it is just brilliant. And that's why I like them. That's why I like buying these old lenses. That's one of the biggest thrills, is just holding such a finely crafted piece of machinery. And we don't see a lot of this kind of detail and craftsmanship in modern equipment anymore. And there's a lot of things about modern equipment that's great. The autofocus, the optical designs are amazing, what we can do. So I don't want to knock that at all. But there's just something about the way these things were made back in the day. It's almost like you can picture some, little elf tinkering with fine tools building this thing. We know that wasn't the case, but it feels like that kind of just craftsmanship went into making these things. And to get something like that with that level of detail and quality for $200 or $300 is just like, wow, why not? And if you don't like a 90 f2.8 focal length, pick up an old 50 Summicron R lens. Okay, I mean, why not? Pick it up. It'll be just as well made as this. Or maybe you want something a little longer. Leica made a 180 tele-Elmerite that's built just like this. So I know this is kind of a review. My reviews are kind of loose anyway. I don't get into the super, line tests and all that. But I will tell you, this lens is very sharp. Modern lenses are just as sharp, but it is very sharp. You're not giving up any kind of optical quality at all. So you get brilliant build quality. You get great optics on this lens. You won't be disappointed whether you shoot it on film or whether you shoot it on a high-resolution digital camera. I don't know if this thing's going to resolve the 5DS, Canon's 50 megapixels. I don't know. But on my 5D Mark III and on the 24 megapixel sensor in this EOS M5, this thing, it definitely pegs it. It uses every one of those pixels and resolves them all with cleanly and sharply. So you're not going to get any bad lens flare or anything like that. Despite the fact that this lens has got lens coatings from 1963, it controls flare and ghosting really well, shockingly well for being a 1960s lens. That's probably more amazing than the sharpness of the lens. So highly recommend this lens, Leica Elmerite 90 f2.8. Come to Photo Fair, get one for yourself, or buy one of the many other lenses similar to it. Look forward to seeing you guys at the shows, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.